Hello, so welcome to C++. If there's a better time to do a WebEx, just let me know, or if there's a specific video you would like to see, just let me know which exercise you're having trouble with. So to start off with C++, I thought it would be fun to post a video. You know, one of the fun things about programming are the fathers of programming are still alive, and you can hear them talk about their codes and their philosophies and stuff on YouTube. So this is a good introduction to object-oriented programming. Oops. Object-oriented programming sequence systems. So anyways, listen to him talk about where C++ came from and the history of it and kind of how it relates to some of the other languages on there. Okay, so if you go under content, I have a couple of links for you here. The first one, this is an online compiler, so you won't have to download anything onto your computer. I'll show you, there's, if you do want a free compiler, CodeBlocks is really good, this little guy. So if you do want something that you actually download and you can have just for future reference, if you get more in depth into this stuff, that's a great resource. But I thought this will be nice because we don't have to worry about who has a Mac and who has a Windows and what version of everything there is. So you're just going to create a free account on here. You can link it to your social media or just use a good, you will be saving projects on here, so it might be nice to choose an email that you'll have for a while, and as well as saving it into the cloud, you can also copy and paste code into Word. Okay, so when it pops up by default, and it might not be default for here, so this actually compiles quite a few different languages. So you might have to select the C++. But it should give you kind of this example code that we did this in Excel too, so it's kind of fun to contrast the different languages. Let me just walk through what this is doing. So the header on this chunk, it's just a comment line, and it's good programming etiquette to explain what the code is supposed to do and kind of the general idea of it for others that might come after you. To create a comment line, so if I get rid of this, I'll see if it changes the color here. So you can either create a comment line with this \**, and that allows you to have multiple lines, and then it will end with the next \\. The other way to add comments, so maybe I want to comment on this line. So I could put just a little comment right next to it, use 2 backslashes. This is output to screen, right? So you can just type yourself a little note of what's happening. The first little chunk, actually, let me pull up the notes. So I didn't have you guys buy a book because there's already some free books online that are updated and really nice reference materials. This one has references for each little bit. The tutorial, and I'm going to take you through stuff that's very similar to this tutorial, and the tutorial will walk through everything in the code here. I think, yeah, mine's pretty much the same here. So this talks about compilers, which is like CodeBlocks or the online compiler. And it's taking what you say more in English and changing it into machine language, zeros and ones, turning transistors on and off, that kind of thing. Starting into the structure of a program. So this is going to walk you through line by line for what is happening in this first code that you see here. So you're going to start with some comment lines. In this one, it was only one, but yeah, so you can start 2 ways to do comment lines on there. The next thing you're going to see is the include IO stream. So that's this little guy right here. That's going to allow us to use see out, which will allow us to output something onto our screen. So here it talks about the hashtag. So this is actually happening before the main program starts. So it's a preprocessor. It's before kind of it compiles. And what it's doing is it's going to grab this little guy right here, which is a header, IO stream, and this is going to allow us to use the tool of see out. So this little guy. I guess in their example, they didn't declare just using standard. In mine, I used namespace standard, so I don't have to put standard in front of everything. They didn't do that, so they're just adding. it's probably easier just to use standard namespace, and so when it gets to see out, it knows that those guys are connected. So anyways, this will take you through line by line from that code. So check out this tutorial right here for a more in-depth discussion of it. So essentially, whatever tools you're going to use in there, there's a whole bunch of different libraries. I'll show you the IO stream and also CMath, so you can use math functions like cosine, sine, tangent, that kind of thing. But there's already pre-built tools, just like Excel had a bunch of pre-built things in it. Okay, so this allows us to avoid having to put standard in front of everything. This is where the main program starts. It's actually a function. So just like we made functions in Excel, in this case, we're not actually sending it any information, but this is going to be the main program, and we'll also create some functions. So the main program will call some other functions. Inside of these curly brackets, so everything inside those curly brackets is what is being executed inside the main function. Blank space doesn't mean anything. It's good to kind of get everything aligned and group things together. So maybe between all of your header files and the main program, put a line, and then just like if that tab isn't there, and you can still run the thing if the tab isn't there. So here's running it. It's going to output hello world onto the screen. But it's just, if you have a big page of code and you want your eyes to kind of follow what is inside of what parentheses and what belongs to what function and stuff, it actually has a built-in beautify tool, which is really nice. You can hit this and it will add spaces in here. So it says, oh, here's an opening parenthesis. So it kind of bumps everything together, and it makes it easier for your eyeball to just kind of see what's inside parentheses, especially when you get longer codes and lots of sets of parentheses and what goes with what. So this beautify tool is very nice. And then everybody has their own kind of personality of how they like to organize it, but it's, yeah, use tabs and don't crunch everything onto one line. I think, does this give some examples of like a good code versus a bad code? So like, yeah, this, you could cram everything in that program on just one line, but it would be kind of confusing. So it's much better to sort of spread things out. And it's, yeah, start with examples. There's tons of open source codes out there. And the next step is to just kind of add on to that example. So for the first little bit that I ask you guys to do, so that's becoming familiar with the C++ syntax. So read through this structure of a program up here. It has an example of using cout. So cout, that's what put hello world onto the screen. Cin, and you can kind of guess what that's going to be. This is input to the computer. So let's say I want to input, how are you, right? I think that's what we did for Excel, right? So I can say cin, and I've already have my namespace, so I don't have to add any of that. These little guys, So you're either pushing things out onto the screen or you're getting things into the screen. So we're just going to reverse the direction of this. I guess we should probably make a question, right? We can't just say hello world. We have to say, hello world, how are you today? We'll just add on to that. Okay, so now it's going to type it'll wait for a response. So what should we call it? We'll call it feels. Okay, so now we're introducing some kind of a variable where it's going to ask a question and then I'm going to type something in. And then maybe after I type something in, it can let me know that yes, I received it. So we can say, you are feeling, and then we'll say feels. End line. We're going to end everything with a semicolon here. Now, right now, I'm going to run it and it's going to give us an error, but I want to see I want everybody to see the error message and how descriptive it is and how to go through debugging this too. And also, so when you do start adding on to a code, just a little bit at a time, just take one line at a time. Okay, so if I go ahead and here's the save button. So I'll go ahead and save this, give it a name. I'll just call it example for week 1. And I'll run it. And I already know the mistake it makes. So it's going to say, error. So read what it tells you that the error is. So it says, feels is not declared. So what does that mean to declare a variable? You have to, if you have something and you're assigning value to it, it doesn't know if I'm going to type in a number or letters, true, false, what memory does it need to allocate for the information that's going to come to it here pretty soon. So right here inside of the main, I'm going to go ahead and add one more line in here. And this will be a word. So we're going to go ahead and declare that variable as a string. So there we go. Now we have declared that variable. And it looks like maybe that was, let's see, what else does it want? It also says there's something wrong with this line too. I forgot my ending semicolon to let it know that that's the end of the line. Okay, let's try it again. See if it'll work this time. Hello world, how are you today? So now it's sitting here waiting for the response. I am great. So I'll put that in. And now it's going to say, see out, you are feeling great. So right here where it says feels, it's actually entering the information that I inputted it. So you can see that this variable now has that information. One other way, let me show you for debugging here, it has this nice little tool. So what we're going to do is I will add in some stop signs here. And we'll go ahead and open up the debugger because now we have a variable that we can watch. So we have this feels variable that we can watch. So I'll go ahead and start. Once you hit the debug button up here, you get this whole new panel of tools right here. So go ahead and start it out. So it's going to come and it's going to stop where I click next to the line. So you click next to the line, create little stop signs. It also, right here is our variable. And there's no value attached to it because I haven't entered any information yet, right? So it's undeclared. But if I keep continuing, so I'm just hitting the continue button. So now it's to the see out screen. Hello, how are you today? And it's going to output this guy to the screen. So here we go. Hello, how are you today? And now I'm going to type this in just like I did when I was running it. So I am great. And you can see that as soon as I type this in, now my variable is assigned a value over here. And we're now progressing to the next line of code. And if I keep continuing, then it will say you are feeling great. So that is this last line. So this is, the debugger is a very nice thing to do to kind of just slow the code down and let it run one line at a time, and you can watch the variables and how the variables are changing. And so that's this first little bit. So use cin, cout, and that's starting to declare some variables. So the next little thing I want you to do, and for each of these, so just take it, one little piece at a time. The next piece, we're going to declare some different kinds of variables. So we had a string that holds letters or words like great or I'm doing horrible or something like that. Int is for integer. Double, this is for something that's going to have decimal points, and so it allocates a bit more memory for that. So we're going to declare some different types of variables and then use those variables to perform some kind of calculation. Yeah, so like find out how old somebody is, or calculate your grade, or find F equals MA or V equals IR, just some very simple calculation. Okay, so let's try this thing out. So come back to our code that we started. So we have, hello, how are you feeling? So there's one variable type. Let's go ahead and we can maybe start a new type of variable. So this time we'll have double. And maybe we have a couple of different grades. So I'll say grade 1. When you're creating variables, don't start with a number. You can use like maybe an underscore instead of a space, but start with a letter. And don't use a word like cin or return or int. Like use a word that's not already in use by the program. Those are called keywords that are already in use. And you can declare multiple variables all in the same row. So you just keep adding on all of the different variables that you want. Maybe grade 3. In the whole thing with a semicolon. You can also, maybe rather than leaving these undefined to start with, you can say, I'm going to just start this out as being 0, and then we can update that later, but it's kind of good to start it with some kind of a starting number. So then maybe we can play around with integers. So this would be maybe the class grade or the total grade. Let's call it total grade. And we'll see what happens if we leave this as an integer rather than a double. Okay, so let's go ahead, and the easiest way to code is just copy and paste. So instead of asking someone how old they are, we're going to say enter grade 1. And I'm going to go ahead and leave a couple of spaces between that text. It would be good to leave a couple spaces here too. When you run it, you have to, think through the formatting of how this is going to go. Okay, so here they're going to be asking for grade 1. And so now we can go ahead and instead of inputting a feeling here, we can input grade 1. Okay, before we add a bunch more lines, it's a good practice to just run it. It's a lot easier to debug when you take it just one little step at a time. So let's try it out. So, okay, those little spaces right there. That's going to make this output look a little bit cleaner. So yay, we're great. You are feeling great. Enter grade 1. So maybe we got an 85% on that first assignment. Okay, Program finished with exit code 0, return 0. So it made it all the way down to return. So far, so good. So now let's go ahead and keep entering grades. Maybe we have 3 different grades. So yeah, copy and paste, Control C, Control V. So we have 1, 1, 2, 2. So this could be like your homework grade or maybe your discussion forum grade. So now that we have all those grades entered, let's go ahead and do some calculation, and then we can assign that calculation to our total grade. So let me go ahead and type in total grade equals, sometimes rather than typing in this stuff, because it's really easy to make a typo, Control C, Control V, and that'll make sure that you have those variable names in there correctly, because that's one of the most common mistakes, is just a typo. You know, how many times do you misspell something when you're typing up a report, or so you didn't get the spelling quite right, or it didn't quite match what you had in the top line. Okay, so here is some calculation. We're going to end that with a semicolon. And now we're going to have to do some kind of output to say what we were. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this line because that has kind of the format that I wanted. So I'll say cout your grade, your total grade is, and then we're going to output this number right here. Okay, so that's probably enough. Let's go ahead and run this guy and see what happens. So we'll run it. And it's going to ask us a bunch of stuff. How are you? I'm great. Enter grade 1, 85. Maybe we did better, and then we did worse again. Okay, so then it took all of these guys and it added together. So maybe, well, I don't want to just add them together, right? I want to calculate the average or something. So can I just put divide by 3? So this is where, think through order of operations and play around with this guy. Let's see if this will run here. So we'll see if it gives us a nice average. So 85, 90. So this is actually not going to average to an integer. You'll notice our output is 83. Now, if I change this around just to play around with variable types, so I'm going to go ahead and just turn that into a comment. When you're experimenting with your code, one way is just to turn something into a comment to temporarily turn it away. And then up here, I'm going to say T grade. So I'm just going to change my variable type here. So we'll rerun it with the same grades, 85, 90, and 75. And then we'll see what kind of an output we get if I have this declared as a double instead of declared as an integer, just to play around with it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and try this out. How are you? So enter grade 1. What did I have? It was like 85, 90, and 75, something like that. Okay, so now we see instead of just having an output of 83, it now has a few more significant figures, right? We have decimal places now, that it is, because it's declared as a double instead of as an integer. Okay, so that's hopefully a good first start for this little bit. And I will make a next video with looking at loops.